Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're powered by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we are going to go in-depth on the Markelle Fultz trade that happened on Saturday night. That trade looks like the number one overall pick going from the Boston Celtics to the Philadelphia 76ers for the number 3 pick, and a very complicated set of protections on a second pick that will either be one of the Lakers 2018 pick or the Sacramento Kings 2019 pick. Then we're going to go into the Phoenix Suns, the team that is directly behind where Boston is picking now, to talk about all of the random little things that are going to go on with their offseason. To do that, I have brought on Fox Sports' own Andrew Lynch. How's it going, buddy?
Excellent, Sam. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, no, it's I'm excited to have you on, of course. And, you know, you've obviously grown up as a Phoenix Suns fan. That part of it will be fun. But before we do that, you obviously do some national work over at Fox as well. And I kind of want to get your impressions of what was kind of going through your mind when you finally heard the terms of this now, 3-day rumored deal with the Boston Celtics and Philadelphia 76ers.
My first instinct was that it was a win-win trade, especially when it was reported that it was going to be both of those future picks. I thought maybe that was a little bit of a hefty price for Philly to pay, but this is why you stockpile assets, right? We've seen it with Sam Hinkie wanted to get there, but we've seen it with Daryl Morey in Houston. You stockpile assets to make a big move. Moving up to get Markelle Fultz, that's a perfect move for Philly. We all know he fits perfectly with that roster. Once we found out that it was in fact that protected 2 through 5 Lakers pick, which is a really cool protection. As a quick aside, excuse me, I like that it's like, well, if this somehow becomes the first pick, you get it. That's good on you. But otherwise, if it's in the top 5, we're keeping it. But when I found out that it was both, it was one pick or the other, that really tipped the balance for me to Philly. Obviously, I just love this trade for them. I still like it for Boston along these lines. If you're the Celtics and you really think that either Jason Tatum or Josh Jackson is your guy, and you don't think Fultz is that much better than one of those guys, you make this move even if perhaps you didn't get as much value as you could, because you know that either Tatum or Jackson is going to be there at 3 regardless of what happens ahead of you. So if that's the decision you've made internally, then I like this move for Boston. In a vacuum, I'm not so sure. I mean, Markelle Fultz really seems to clearly be the number 1 guy in this draft, so you're giving up a lot of value in that sense. But in terms of the specific dynamics for the teams, I really do think it's a win-win for both.
So, yeah, let's talk about Boston first, because I think they're the more interesting side of the spectrum, right? Philadelphia we'll talk about momentarily, but, the Boston side of this deal is fascinating to me, because a lot of people have kind of thrown around reasons why they would make this deal. It clears $1.4 million in cap space or in cap room to go out and sign Gordon Hayward. They can now feel confident in their decision to, extend or re-sign Isaiah Thomas after next offseason.
Ugh.
Which, sorry. Yeah, I know. Obviously, as a Suns fan, as Suns fans listen to this part of the podcast, they're going to be upset. Having said that, I'm not even sure I'm a huge fan of that contract either. But
that's what I mean. Yeah, I don't we can talk about that in a minute, but I think that is a major mistake by Boston.
Well, yeah, it's a complicated number there, because with Isaiah, on one hand, he's never been injured. He is, doesn't have a crazy amount of miles on him for a typical 29-year-old point guard, right? Having said that, medical advances are also getting higher, and maybe 31 is the new 29 in point guard years, but it's a scary contract to me. I don't know that I want to pay Isaiah Thomas.
I agree 100%. For all of those reasons, and I am still a believer that it's really difficult to win a championship with Isaiah Thomas as your primary offensive facilitator or your primary offensive force. I think you can. I'm the same person who always has said you can win a championship with Carmelo Anthony as your best offensive player, but it's really difficult. You have to be very precise in your roster construction, and given where Boston is in their rebuild, or their whatever you want to call this, I don't know that they have the flexibility to put together the perfect team around Isaiah Thomas.
Right. You really need to insulate him with a lot of, excellent help defenders, guys like Draymond Green who can kind of, float around and really help him contain penetration on the perimeter. And you need to have like this excellent rim protector who's going to be able to protect Isaiah Thomas defensively if he gets beaten and gets the opposing offense gets penetration into the lane. But more than all of those other factors, I think, more than anything else, what this trade ultimately came down to for me is that Danny Ainge did not believe that Markelle Fultz was head and shoulders better than any other prospect in this draft, as you mentioned.
I agree. That's my read as well. I don't know if that's the correct read. It's tough to say because Ainge and the Celtics have so much more information than I do, and I think we have to keep that in mind. But from everything I've seen, both with my own eyes, both reading other people whose opinions I very much respect, I do believe that Fultz is the clear number one in this draft. So I'm curious, Sam, if you can get in Danny Ainge's head, what do you think he's seeing that makes him disagree with that assessment?
So my idea on that is this. I think that Markelle Fultz, the reason that I have him number one, head and shoulders above everyone else, is that it's incredibly difficult for me to see a circumstance where he fails in any way. Like, I think that it's really difficult to see a way that he doesn't become a top 20 point guard, or not even top 20 point guard, top 20 offensive force in the NBA. Like, he is that skilled, he's that polished, he's that athletic, he's that, he's got everything that you're looking for out of a lead guard, right? What I can see Danny Ainge believing, though, is that maybe he's not this franchise-altering force, right? Like, maybe he's not a potential top 3 player in the NBA. And if that's the case, why not try and continue punt it down the road and, take your Jason Tatum, take your Josh Jackson, and try and, take another shot at it next year. My problem, though, with this deal, and it's kind of an ancillary problem because we don't know what the next step is for Boston yet, and we'll get to that in a second. I think that this pick protection for them is incredibly risky given that they're only getting one asset back in return on top of number 3. The reason that I say that is that between picks number 2 and number 8 this year, there's only a difference of 6 games separating those two teams in terms of win-loss record. And all of those teams right now, I think, from Los Angeles to Sacramento to Phoenix to Orlando to, all of those like 7 teams that are, a stop above Brooklyn, but probably a little bit below the rest of the teams in the NBA. They're all so tightly bunched, and that creates a situation where I can easily see the Lakers getting into that like number 7, number 8, number 9 range, which means the pick transfers out again to 2019. And I don't know how I feel about trusting Sacramento to continue to be this inept. I know that it's worked in the past. I know that this has been, exactly what the Bulls have been waiting for. They've been waiting for the Bulls or for Sacramento to get to the point where they are no longer so inept that they're not picking in the top 10 of the draft even, and that's never happened. But you can at least see stages of 2 years down the road, this Kings team being pretty decent. They're going to get 2 picks this year, number 5 and number 10. They're going to get Skal Labissiere is probably going to take a leap of some sort. Buddy Hield's going to take a leap of some sort. Willie Cauley-Stein's going to take a leap of some sort. And okay, even if all of those guys don't take leaps, maybe they don't, maybe they don't end up, becoming this, top 10 team in the NBA or even bottom 10 team in the NBA. But the problem is that when you're taking on the risk of that pick asset, you're assuming they're going to be a bottom 5 team in the NBA essentially. And I don't know that I can guarantee that. And whenever you have a bird in the hand that is Markelle Fultz, I don't know that I am willing to give that up for such a risky singular asset.
I think, number one, you probably have a little bit more confidence in the Kings going forward than I do. I think that in a vacuum, that Kings pick is going to be very, very valuable. In fact, I think that Boston is probably counting on the Lakers pick not commuting and getting that Sacramento pick, which to your point is incredibly risky. You are like, I haven't run the expected value on that or any of the probabilities on that, but like that's got to be about a coin flip, I would, just off the top of my head. And the other thing is you can take Fultz and trade him down the road, right? Like he could win the Rookie of the Year and you can trade him. We've seen that before with a much worse point guard.
Yeah.
So I think that alone was probably overlooked, that the Celtics could have continued to dangle this package out there, see if there's anything better, see if there's a better package. If the Pacers maybe want to move Paul George, or if the Bulls want to maybe move Jimmy Butler. I don't know if Boston wants a package like that because of the existence of LeBron James, but it does surprise me that they didn't maybe look at the other options a little further. There was no rush to make this move unless one or the other team is looking to make another move before the draft on Thursday.
Right, yeah. The big question here is, what does Boston do going forward? Do they decide to push all in and go get a Jimmy Butler or a Paul George, which we'll get to in a second because Woj just broke some news while we were podcasting that seems relatively important to the NBA. Or do they decide, we're going to go out and we're going to sign Gordon Hayward and then we're going to try and add to that? How does the next step of this work for Boston? Do they trade, number 3 to Sacramento for a couple other pick assets? I don't really know. I think it's a really difficult, kind of situation to figure out right now for the Boston Celtics. But because of that, Danny Ainge is a goddamn great general manager. Like he will understand the board. He knows what's going on. He is one, executive of another team yesterday I was talking to. He pointed this out. He said that, Danny Ainge is not playing checkers. He is playing chess, and only he can see the board right now in terms of, what exactly their plan is. And that makes things really difficult to try and map out for the rest of the Boston Celtics offseason, right? Maybe this trade is the move that allows them to keep a ton of assets going forward in the draft, as well as get a Jimmy Butler next to a Gordon Hayward and build like that. Maybe it's, a different situation. We just don't know yet.
We don't. We don't know what Ainge wants. And I think as simplistic as that is, it starts from there. Does he want to take a competitive team into, say, the 2019 season as perhaps LeBron is starting to slip a little bit, or is he looking to wait until LeBron is completely out of the picture? Like, I know that's a thought that everyone keeps coming back to, but I think there's a reason for that. It really boils down to, when is Boston going to make a move to start being competitive? Does it start now? Do they make a move for one of those wings, Butler or George, or does it come down the road? And if it's coming down the road, I really think they're going to try to move 3 for 5 and 10.
Yeah, and I think that if they can do that, I don't think they're going to be able to be honest.
Right.
I just don't see the Kings doing that. Man, I mean, yeah, they should do it. They should trade 3 for 5 and 10 if they can. But again, I don't see that happening. I think they can get maybe 5 and something else, or they can get 10 and a bunch of other things. I'm just not entirely sure yet what the idea is. Let's talk about the 76ers real quick before we get into this crazy Woj bomb that just broke. This is kind of a no-brainer for me if I am Philadelphia. I am happy to give up just one of these extra assets that I have accumulated over the course of the Sam Hinkie era and acquire a point guard that is genuinely a perfect fit for exactly what I want.
Yep, 100% agree. I mean, maybe you have some concerns about three-point shooting in Philly moving forward. You can cross that bridge when you come to it. This is a perfect move for the 76ers. Kudos to Brian Colangelo for making the move, and of course, kudos to Sam Hinkie for putting Philly in position to make this move. And I think both those things can be true, right? I know the whole general manager situation in Philadelphia can be a little contentious sometimes. I think on this move, both the current and the former general manager deserve a lot of credit.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wrote this morning or last night or whatever the hell happened. I kind of blacked out at some point. I don't really know. That's exactly what I wrote, though. I was like, this is kind of the process 2.0 now, right? You have this combination of efforts from each of the last two front offices. Sam Hinkie had this vision to accumulate assets and basically make the NBA draft idiot-proof, to where he would get so many cracks at it that he was going to be able to get this franchise-altering talent. And now Brian Colangelo has come in and he has found a way to build essentially a trio that I think kind of fits perfectly together. And that's something that last year I didn't really know how that was going to work, because to be honest, Ben Simmons is an incredibly difficult asset to build around. He is a 6'10" player that can't really shoot, that needs the ball in his hands a lot, and that isn't a primary rim protector. So yeah, he's incredibly skilled and incredibly talented, but I was worried that they were never going to be able to kind of like find that exact right fit that they were looking for. But with Markelle Fultz, and obviously with Joel Embiid showing what he showed this year, shooting from deep and being one of the three best rim protectors in the NBA, there's just so much utility now in exactly what Ben Simmons' game is, because, you know, Markelle Fultz is exactly the kind of point guard you want to put next to him. He's able to operate in the pick and roll and create in the half court. You're going to be able to run some really interesting 1-4 pick and rolls with him and Simmons, where Simmons is going to be able to do that short roll and then kind of dime out guys on kickouts. Simmons is going to be able to lead the break, and Fultz is going to be able to, roll into transition passing lanes. Like, it's just such a perfect fit on so many levels. And with Fultz, the Sixers are going to absolutely kind of help out his weaknesses as well, because Joel Embiid, again, is one of the best rim protectors in the NBA, and the key with Fultz now is defense. I mean, he's just such an apathetic defender at times that you really have to worry about, is he going to be able to consistently, stop guys at the point of attack and stop guys from getting penetration? Embiid's going to shut that down, and it kind of doesn't matter anymore.
You know who I really am happy for is Brett Brown. God bless Brett Brown, who now gets to coach a roster and teach a roster. Well, yeah, right. Hopefully gets to teach and coach a roster that's perfect for him. The other thing that I really like about the Fultz pick for Philly is, because we have these injury concerns with both Embiid and Simmons to varying degrees, if for whatever unfortunate reason one or the other has a catastrophic injury moving forward, Fultz gives you an opportunity to pivot and to keep building a roster. That's what I really like about that as well. Yep,
that's a great point. All right, we've talked about that trade. Let's talk about what might be an upcoming trade now that Adrian Wojnarowski just broke as we started podcasting, so this is kind of going to be a rapid reaction here. Sources, according to Woj, say that Paul George tells the Pacers he plans to leave the franchise in 2018 free agency and currently prefers the Los Angeles Lakers. This isn't a surprise to anyone in NBA circles. I mean, this has been like an open secret that Paul George was going to leave and, likely end up in Los Angeles in some way. He's from Southern California, really enjoys the area, obviously. My thing is now, though, what do the Pacers do? I don't really know exactly how they should try and move on from this.
I would be leaking as many potential deals as possible if I'm that Pacers front office to try to encourage the Lakers to make a move. Because the Lakers can sit pat on this. They can just wait for Paul George to come to them. And I think that's the best move for Los Angeles, is you do wait. I don't think you give up assets unless you think there's a star free agent you can add next offseason, and having George now helps build that case. In that case, perhaps you package some of these young players and you try to make a deal for George. But if I'm Indiana, I'm starting a bidding war now. I'm trying to get as many assets as I can, knowing full well that Paul George might tell teams, I'm not re-signing with you, I'm heading to Los Angeles. So you got to test the market. You got to try and build that bidding war between suitors, and you have to see, how much hardball Boston's going to play, I think. I don't think Danny Ainge is going to offer you much for Paul George because he thinks that PG will end up in Los Angeles. And I don't think, from what I've heard, I'm not sure Paul George is a huge fan of the idea of playing in Boston. It's that old yarn all over again. But it doesn't necessarily have to be Boston that makes a trade with Indiana, even though they probably have the most assets. There are going to be other teams out there that are going to be interested in Paul George. Houston's going to kick the tires, obviously. I don't know that they have anything coming close to a package that will entice the Pacers, but you're going to have a lot of teams interested. So you might as well see what the offers are now.
Yeah, this seems like a kind of perfect scenario for Daryl Morey to try and like pop in and win like now, win next season, even though they have this massive Warriors problem on their hands here. You know, maybe this is a really interesting kind of idea. I just popped into my head, but like, you know, say that the Spurs miss out on Chris Paul, or maybe they don't miss out on Chris Paul. You know, does a trade for Paul George work for the Spurs to try and, you know, make that run toward the NBA Finals that they genuinely believe that they could have made this year before Kawhi Leonard got hurt? Like that makes sense to me a little bit. I don't think the Celtics really make sense at all for this anymore, given that now Paul George has made his intentions very clear, right? The Celtics are trying to build toward being the team after the Warriors and Cavs are done, I think. The Spurs are trying to win now. The Rockets are trying to win now. Cleveland obviously is trying to win now. I think they could probably put together a pretty competitive offer for a year of Paul George. What do you think like kind of makes sense here, I guess?
I genuinely do not. My first instinct is that Paul George is not traded, even with this news. I think that Indiana front office and certain people in particular think they're legendary enough to convince him that this is the wrong move, and they're going to take every opportunity to do that. I don't think he moves. I think he ends up in Los Angeles as a free agent.
Well, here's another question here. If you're the Cavs, are you willing to trade Kevin Love for Paul George for a single season?
Yeah, I mean, you probably give it a try. Paul George is a better player than Kevin Love in a vacuum. I don't think it increases your odds of beating the Warriors, not significantly. I think Kevin Love has taken a pretty big leap forward on defense in a team defensive scheme, not necessarily as an individual defender. I think continuity and chemistry continue to be underrated in the NBA. What the Warriors did this year is extraordinary on a lot of levels, not least of which by just making Kevin Durant comfortable in a span of 3 months? By January, he was playing like he'd been with the team for 2 years. That doesn't happen. LeBron knows firsthand how difficult it can be to get guys on the same page. Now, Paul George and LeBron James, their skill sets don't overlap in the same way that LeBron James and Dwayne Wade's did. There's a lot more of a dovetailing there, but still, it wouldn't be an easy situation to come into and win right away. They'd blow away the Eastern Conference. Paul George allows LeBron to rest during the course of a game in a way that Kevin Love doesn't, as more of a little bit more of an offensive playmaker. But I don't think that it's shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic, to go to a cliche. It really is. I don't think moving Kevin Love for Paul George drastically increases your chances of beating the Warriors in the finals. But with that said, yes, it's a good move. It's an upgrade. So if Indiana is willing to make that move, I'd probably do it. But I would know that it's rolling the dice, and the dice are loaded against you. So
I don't definitely agree with you that the dice are totally loaded at this stage against the Cavs, and they're loaded against Indiana at this stage too. What I will say about a Cleveland Paul George trade is that it interests me from a Cavs point of view to have just about every contract on their books come up after next season. I think there is something to getting rid of Kevin Love's money long term and rebuilding around Kyrie Irving, if I can do that.
That's a really good point. I think that's 100% fair, especially if I am not convinced LeBron is staying.
Right. That's the key here. Are we convinced that LeBron stays? I don't really think anyone around the NBA is that knows anything, to be honest. The reports obviously have come out here and there, just kind of hinting at the fact that he could leave at some point in the near future. His contract is obviously up next season. we'll see what happens there. I do think it's interesting to have everything come up, though, at the same time. In terms of a Los Angeles Lakers trade, do you see anything there that makes sense? Which, by the way, if the Lakers trade for Paul George now, they can offer him an extra year in free agency next summer. So that could be appealing to them. Like Julius Randle and maybe like a couple of draft picks or something. Like I can't see them giving up anything more than that.
No, I agree. And that's where it really gets interesting, because I think any trade offer the Lakers are going to make realistically would be trumped by someone else out there. But if I'm the Lakers, I'm kind of okay with that. It's like, yeah, okay, give up assets for a 3-month rental of Paul George. I genuinely believe he's coming to Los Angeles. I don't know if the money mattered that much to Paul George. I think he would stay in Indiana. If I'm Paul George, I'm hoping that the Lakers do make a trade so that I can have my cake and eat it too. But yeah, I don't really think the Lakers should offer much more than, like you said, Julius Randle and Jordan Clarkson and a maybe late first rounder, like the 28th this year or something.
Maybe one other reason that the Lakers could do this is that they can say, hey, we'll give you Jordan Clarkson, we'll give you Julius Randle, but you have to take on Luol Deng's contract. Because right now, the Lakers only have, if I remember correctly, like, because of those dumbass deals to Deng and Timofey Mozgov, they only have like $14-15 million next summer to actually like play with in free agency. So maybe that's an interesting move. Like, you can kind of get Paul George for relative peanuts. The Pacers get a couple of interesting young players, but the key for the Lakers is that you move on and you get you get your cap space, and then you also have the ability to maybe try and sign another free agent and then go use your bird rights to go over the cap and sign Paul George as well.
Yeah, I think that's a fair play, but it comes down to draft picks, and I don't know if the Lakers are going to be able to put together a package that both gets them Paul George from the Pacers and entices Indiana to take on one of those deals. 3-teamer, maybe, that obviously is always a possibility, but the more organizations that get involved in a deal, the more difficult it becomes to actually consummate that deal. It's going to be really interesting to see. I think there are a lot, to your point, there are a lot of pressures here kind of pushing in opposite directions.
I guess the thing is, like, what team is going to offer real draft picks for Paul George now? Like, is anyone going to do that? Like, is anyone going to offer a top 10 pick?
I think that there will be. I don't know a team off the top of my head, but yeah, I think there's always going to be a surprise offer that we don't expect. I mean, it's the NBA silly season. This is why it's better than the regular season, and this year the playoffs. I think there will be something that comes out of left field where we're just like, okay, now it's game on. Because Paul George saying more or less explicitly what we all knew was true, that gets everyone's attention. So I do think this is going to be one of those. It's going to be like a Dwight Mayer scenario where we're going to have a lot of teams trying to get into the pool.
Yeah, I'm like trying to rapidly use like a trade machine right now,
right,
to figure out like can the Lakers do this? Can the Lakers like pawn off all of these all of these players? Like Julius Randle, I think realistically might be the best asset they can get back. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm a little bit higher on Julius Randle than what I would imagine most people are. But like, I just don't see how there's going to be like a ton of pick value going that direction.
Sorry, I'm looking real quick. I off the top of my head, really quickly, I don't know how they would make it work, but I just had this thought that, man, Paul George would be a lot of fun in Utah. He's not staying in Salt Lake City, but like if Paul George were on that Jazz team, that's a really fun team, with or without Gordon Hayward. But I don't think Derek Favors and a potential like that Golden State pick and a future Jazz pick is going to get it done, obviously.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, Maybe, maybe like Al Jefferson. Like, does Al Jefferson thrown in? Like, I feel like you can do this deal. I think that the Lakers end up doing something to get him there sooner rather than later. I think there are actually realistic ways. It would require the Pacers taking on long-term money in Luol Deng, but maybe they can do that to get a real asset going forward. But again, maybe the Cavs end up offering Kevin Love, and I think that if that happens, that should probably be the move. Like, if I'm the Pacers and I can get Kevin Love, who is still, a top 30-ish player in the NBA, I'm probably taking that, don't you think?
I would think so. I'm curious. In your mind, is there any way that just letting Paul George go is a better play for the Pacers than making a move for either Kevin Love with all that money or having to take on one of those Lakers bad deals? Just one of those two trades. Obviously, I think Indiana will make a move of some sort and get some assets back here. But if I'm the Pacers, I would almost rather just have the cap space moving forward and the freedom and the flexibility than have to do something to get Julius Randle that costs me the remaining years of the Mozgov or Deng deal. And I'm a little bit lower on Randle, I think, than most people. I've come around on him this season. I don't know if that's enough of an asset to make me want to take on one of those deals. I'm almost like, you're going to have him in the summer.
Well, if they were like a realistic like free agency destination, I think that strategy makes sense to me, but they're not. Like, who wants? Like, I don't think there are enough guys that want to move to like the middle of Indiana.
Right, but you don't have to use cap space necessarily to sign big name free agents. You can use it to this point to make trades that get you genuine assets back to take on bad money. This is like the worst baseline asset you could get to take on some of the worst contracts in the NBA.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It really might not be worth getting like Jordan Clarkson and Julius Randle and taking on money.
Yeah, I would never make that trade. I would it's like, hell, you could have Julius Randle and Jordan Clarkson, and all you have to do is pay Timothy Mozgov for that. It's like, no, I'm hanging up on you.
I don't know that I would hang up. Because I think Randle's going to be like a top 50 player in the NBA at some point. Like, I am really high on Julius Randle, like figuring it out. But like, I would hang up if I didn't believe that. I think it all depends on like how you value the asset, right?
Absolutely. But I think to bring it back to that Fultz point, I think if I'm making this trade, I don't necessarily want guys who it's like, he's going to figure it out and like he's going to be really good. It's like, I would rather keep the flexibility that perhaps allows me to get a game changer down the road. Now, that's taking the mystery box instead of the boat, but give me the mystery box. Yeah,
and if you're Indiana, maybe the mystery box is a little bit better than even like Kevin Love for 3 more years or whatever. Let's talk about the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns have pick number 4, number 32. Is that it, I believe? Just 4 and 32?
Yes, I believe so.
Pretty good assets values, actually. Number 32, they're going to get a first-round value talent, I believe, in my opinion. They also have 54. It's worth mentioning as well. How would you kind of describe the Phoenix season this year? Because on some level, Eric Bledsoe took a nice step forward, and obviously he doesn't really fit the timeline of the team. So really, he just took a nice step forward for his trade value. Devin Booker had an interesting season that I think might have been slightly overrated, but nonetheless, he's still probably one of the 10 most interesting players that are under 22 in the NBA. Marquise Chris was a little bit better than I thought. But overall, it's hard for me to kind of figure out the direction of this organization right now, given that they still have Brandon Knight, still have Tyson Chandler, still have Jared Dudley, all of these like older players on the books. So where are you at with right now, how the season went in Phoenix and where they're going in the future?
I'm so glad you said that it's hard for you to figure out a direction for this team, because the phrase that I would use to describe the Phoenix Suns in 2017 is treading water. Yeah. But like with just your nostrils above the surface, like it's not good in Phoenix, and they didn't do a whole lot this year. Like to your point, Eric Bledsoe looked really good this year, so they benched him to get more time for the young guys. They benched Tyson Chandler for the majority of the second half of the season. I agree with your assessment of Devin Booker, and that might get me kicked out of the Suns fan club. There's no structure in Phoenix, and a guy like Booker craves structure. He needs structure. He needs to be taught which are good shots, which are bad shots, because he can make them all. He's young Kobe. He's young Kobe right now. Like, that's, at least in his head, that's who he is, and he doesn't have anyone to like rein him in the slightest. Yeah. So I genuinely worry about Booker going forward. I don't think he's going to become any kind of like rebellious problem in the locker room or anything. Sure. But he's just going to be a gunner, and I don't know that he is quite a good enough shooter to be the gunner that he thinks he is.
Yeah, that's a really good point. One other thing, just kind of going back toward this other conversation we just came from with Paul George. Paul George, D'Angelo Russell, and Julius Randle all share the same agent. So I would imagine the fact that, like, given that I am pretty sure that Aaron Mintz is the one who leaked this to Woj, that they're going to want to all stick together in Los Angeles and kind of make things work there, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, and that's a really, really good point. I'm sure your listeners are well aware of that, but it's something that just, because it's such inside baseball or inside basketball information, people don't really consider, but it's one of those real factors that genuinely impacts how these things play out. So yeah. It's absolutely worth highlighting.
Yeah. Shout out Pete Zayas, Laker film room guy on Twitter. He does a great job with that. I really, really enjoy that podcast and really enjoy his website as well, breaking down the Lakers. Let's go back to Phoenix, though. I'm sorry for that little aside.
No worries.
Obviously have some decisions to make here before we even get to the draft pick, which is really interesting in a lot of ways given the trade that happened on Saturday. Eric Bledsoe, let's kind of start with him. I would imagine that this is where they try to cash in on his asset value. It would make sense to me for them to move him along this offseason.
It has to be, right? If not this offseason, by the deadline. I can't see.
I don't even know if I want to take that risk given his injury
I agree with you. I 100% agree with you. There's a 3-1 shot that he gets injured before then, for sure, or that he doesn't play as well as he did in 2016-17. I think the Suns have to be looking to move Bledsoe, and along those lines, even if for whatever reason they end up keeping him to the draft, that doesn't preclude you from taking his replacement, and it shouldn't. To skip ahead a little bit, Phoenix 100% is in full best player available status, and if they're targeting any specific position, they're doing this wrong.
I think that realistically they should probably not be going for like a Devin Booker level, like, two-guard scorer that can't really defend anyone. Like, that should be their only player type that they should be avoiding.
100% agree. Yeah, if the Suns take Malik Monk at number 4, right, I am officially a fan free agent.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly a great person to compare him to. Like, if they take Malik Monk, that doesn't really make sense.
But I mean, if obviously the Lakers take Lonzo, then I'm happy with either Jackson or Tatum. To be honest, I'm a huge Jonathan Isaac guy. I'm in that camp. Like, I would love him in Phoenix if the Celtics take Jackson, or if the Lakers do even. And then, of course, prior to some of his more controversial statements, which I do not support, I was a big LeVar Ball guy. I like that LeVar is... Well, I'll explain. I like that LeVar is putting a target on Lonzo's back. I do like that, because if I just want to be great, maybe I don't want that target on my back. I want a chance to feel out the NBA. I want a chance to make my own path.
Yep.
But if I want to be the greatest, then I want your best shot every night. I want you to be looking at me like I have a target on my back, because that's the only way I'm going to improve to the best of my capabilities. I want greatness to push greatness. So I was okay with that. I liked that LeVar was putting that target on Lonzo's back. Then some of the other stuff, obviously that's a whole different ballgame. So I say that because given that there's a greater than 50% chance that Lonzo Ball ends up in Phoenix just so I reap what I sow. But other than that, I would love love one of these defensive upside wings for Phoenix.
Yeah, so let's start at number 4 then, I guess. We can move into some of the other roster decisions at some point here in a minute. At number 4, I think that Lonzo is probably number 1 on their board. Throughout the course of the season, they've been rumored to be enamored with him, in NBA circles. If they end up getting to a point where Lonzo Ball falls to 4, I think they'll select him. Number 2 on their board, I think, is probably going to be Josh Jackson. It seems like too easy of a fit to me. This is one of those cases where I don't really have inside information into what they're thinking on Josh Jackson, but that the fit in terms of his just talents next to Devin Booker is just so perfect. It's impossible for me to see a circumstance where you could pass on that and pass on having these awesome wings whenever the potential is that you could have a perfect complementary player to what Devin Booker is as a player. So I think Jackson's number 2. I think that Jonathan Isaac is kind of number 3 on their board. They've had him in twice, I believe, for workouts or for meetings and things like that. There are some rumors in NBA circles as well that they are really big fans, particularly the coaching staff is a pretty big fan, I guess, of Jonathan Isaac. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't take him over Jason Tatum. I haven't really asked around about like the comparison between those two for that particular front office, but I think there's a pretty sneaky shot that Jonathan Isaac would go number 4 ahead of Jason Tatum, even if Jason Tatum, I think, has a realistic 50-50 shot to go number 3 to Boston ahead of Josh Jackson, which I think kind of goes to show the ways that you can evaluate this class are wildly different, in my opinion, once you get past Markelle Fultz at number 1.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. The way that I've kind of been evaluating this draft is I think all the way down to 30, maybe even 35, 40, there's going to be a player who is available for the team selecting at any given position who's really going to help you and complement your roster. I don't know how many superstars there are in this draft necessarily, but I think it's going to be a really productive draft for the NBA overall, or at least has the potential to be.
Yeah, especially when you look at the perimeter position, right? This is kind of a sneaky thing, but the young point guards in the NBA currently really aren't that strong. If you look at the 2013 draft, the 2014 draft, the 2015 draft, and the 2016 draft, really only like Dennis Schroeder and D'Angelo Russell have stepped in and like shown themselves to be competent, like starting level point guards. Like maybe you can count Marcus Smart in that because Marcus Smart is at least like a starter quality player. I don't really know that he's a point guard yet, but like, it's going to be good to get this influx of skill in the NBA.
Yeah, agreed. And I have an NBA editor who's been kicking around the idea that like, is there a chance that we're headed towards like a skill dearth after LeBron James retires? And I don't think we're headed down that road, but it's going to be nice to get some perimeter skill into the NBA that's going to kind of buttress against that moving forward. Yeah, I agree with your son's big board, as it were. I think that's about right. If Jackson is still available, he's the clear pick, and I would love for him to be in Phoenix. I'm just not counting on that, and in that case, I really hope it's Isaac. But again, the draft is only one part of what Phoenix is going to do this offseason. One hopes. The problem to preface this a little bit is I don't know what the case is with that front office moving forward. I like Ryan McDonough. I think he's made some mistakes that have unfortunately compounded and dug himself into a pretty bad spot. I don't know how much longer he's in Phoenix.
Yeah, and that creates a situation where maybe they keep Eric Bledsoe even though they should probably move him. Maybe they try and sign a free agent this summer to win now and, maybe try and solidify his place there. That creates a really complicated situation, I think, for this front office.
And you're exactly right.
That's terrifying also.
It is absolutely terrifying because it's the wrong move. It's probably the rational move for someone in McDonough's position. I get it.
Yep.
But for the franchise, I think this Suns team, unfortunately, is going to continue to spin its wheels. And the only way that perhaps they build any forward momentum is by more or less lucking into some really talented players.
Yeah, no, that I totally agree with. In terms of the rest of this roster, Brandon Knight, Tyson Chandler, do you think there's any move to be made there? I mean, I think it's really difficult for me to find a taker for, what is essentially $36 or so million on each of those two. We're on Brandon Knight's deal, but then there's also like $27 million on Tyson Chandler's deal still.
Yeah, I think the moment to move Brandon Knight was probably sometime last year, and Phoenix just didn't take the opportunity. Well,
the moment to move Brandon Knight was before they acquired Brandon Knight.
Yeah, you're 100% right there. And yeah, I'd like to fool myself into thinking that a fringe title contender might take a swing on Chandler as a rim protector and as a defender, or as a rebounder, excuse me. I think he's better than he's played in Phoenix because he's not exactly motivated to play at his peak in Phoenix. He's essentially getting paid to do NBA Cares appearances, which is awesome. Good on you. But yeah, that's I think those two gentlemen will be Suns through the end of their contracts.
Yeah, it's hard for me to find a taker unless they're willing to like offload some of these young guys as an attachment to them.
Shout out Jared Dudley, one of my favorite players ever.
Just a great human.
Just so real. Yeah, like he's been on FS1 a lot lately. And he's just great. I love Jared Dudley so much, and he's one veteran that like I hope retires as a Sun, even if he's not necessarily giving you a lot of value on the court.
Yeah, like honestly, you could easily trade Jared Dudley tomorrow to like another team that needs a stretch four. I don't think that would be a crazy issue at all.
Yep, no, Jared could help a team for sure, but I don't want him to. Selfishly, I want him in Phoenix.
Before we get into some of these young guys, Alex Len is a free agent this summer, restricted, and Alan Williams is a restricted free agent as well. Which player would you rather have back in Phoenix?
Alan Williams, not even close.
Yeah, I don't think it's close either.
A lightning round. Like, so during that draft when the Suns took Len, I was still hosting ESPN's Daily Dime Live, the NBA chat at the time, and when Nerlens Noel fell to that 5 or 6 pick, whatever it was, I was so stoked. I wanted Nerlens so badly in Phoenix. I was a huge Nerlens guy, and I was like just basically talking trash in the chat about how great the Suns were going to be, getting this awesome rim protector, and with the whatever pick the Suns select Alex Len, and I was just like, okay, this is it's just hello darkness, my old friend from here on out.
And he hasn't developed at all. Like I think he might eventually be something useful, like as a backup center in the NBA. But like, I don't even know what to do with him at this stage. Like, how much money do you think he gets from some random team this summer?
Jesus, I don't think anyone gives him more than like the mid-level exception, maybe, but like I don't know, maybe some team out there is like, that dude's tall and he's still youngish, so let's give him $12 million a year.
That'd be such a bad idea.
It'd be such a bad idea, but you know what? God bless Alex Len if that happens. I'm all for dudes getting as much money as possible. So while he hasn't exactly evolved into the player many had hoped in Phoenix, I have no ill will towards him. God bless you for getting paid.
Alan Williams is one of my favorite human beings
ever.
Just like having met him and talked to him before, he's like one of the nicest guys that you'll talk to. Just essentially like a big like teddy bear that is also like ferocious on the basketball floor. I would pay him like $5 million a year to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. I would in a heartbeat. I would love for him to be back in Phoenix. He's just like, he's a good locker room guy, and I think to an extent that kind of stuff gets overrated, but at the same time with a team like Phoenix, like you got to have guys in the locker room who make it a joy to come to work for an 82 game season. Otherwise your young guys are just going to show up, mope, and not try to get better. Like that's such a huge part of young guys development, is coming to an atmosphere and an environment where they want to get better, and guys like Alan Williams could really help build that.
Yep, and then he's also from Phoenix too, or from the Arizona area at least. I can't remember if he's from like Flagstaff or.
I was going to say, I think he's from Sedona, that area.
Yeah,
right.
But like he's from that area. I'm sure that he would be happy to stay. Let's talk about some of the young guys now. Dragan Bender and Marquise Chris. I loved the Dragan Bender pick last year. Was not a fan of Chris pick at number 8, especially given what they gave up for him. They gave up number 13, number 28, and Bogdan Bogdanovic, who obviously continues to take massive steps forward over in Turkey, and it looks like he's going to come over this summer. How do you look back and evaluate? Let's start with Chris. How do you look back and evaluate the way that trade has gone?
It's actually exceeded my expectations in a certain sense. The piece that I was most concerned about in that trade was Bogdanovic. I thought that I think he's going to be a very, very good player, the kind that a team like Phoenix or anyone really needs. But Chris has kind of exceeded my expectations. You never want to draw any kind of conclusion, really, from Summer League. But what I saw from him at Summer League this past year was a guy who lacked a little bit of confidence on the offensive end. He was playing way above the rim defensively, getting up, swatting shots, making good decisions, but he struggled to finish around the rim at Summer League, almost as if he wasn't sure that he could finish against this NBA level competition. And over the first few months of this season, I saw that part of his game go away. He really started to develop a sense that, oh no, I belong here. So I wasn't a huge Chris guy when they made the move, but just seeing little improvements, little steps in his game this year, I think he's going to be a really solid piece for them moving forward.
So it's amazing to me that the Kings screwed that 13th pickup so badly, and I still think they ended up getting the better end of this deal. If you had to pick between Marquise Chris and Skal Labissière, given what you've seen so far, who would you pick?
Skal, for sure.
Yeah, I would pick Skal. And to be honest, I think Bogdanovic is probably a better player than both of them.
Yep.
So, it's hard for me not to look back and be like, well, the Suns gave up two of the three best players in a the two best players in a 4-person trade. So, how do we reconcile this for the Suns? But I do agree with you on the other hand that Marquise Chris was a little bit better than I expected this year. I thought that he was going to be an abject disaster in a lot of ways in Phoenix, just in terms of being awful defensively, and he really wasn't good defensively at all, and not necessarily improving skill-wise. He at least shot 32% from 3, which is an encouraging sign going forward, I think. I was more impressed with him than I thought I would be. I thought that this could end really poorly, but instead he showed off a lot of the athleticism that I think a lot of NBA scouts led those NBA scouts to having a higher grade on him come draft day than I did. And
you're absolutely right, and there's an important broader point there, which is on these trades, you have to evaluate them on multiple levels. The Suns lost that trade, but given what happened from that trade, I would say Chris's progress to this point is a win. They didn't win the trade, but at least they can take that small victory in that one battle, that if we made this trade for this reason, at least the player we wanted is taking those steps forward that we saw. I agree with you that the Kings got the better end of that deal, even having messed up the 13th pick. But it is nice that at least Phoenix didn't completely mess up the deal.
Yeah, I agree with that. Not Skal Labissière, Dragan Bender, didn't play a ton of minutes last year, dealt with some injuries. I'm still a pretty big fan of his game. He has incredible basketball IQ, can move laterally at 7 feet tall. I think he's going to be able to shoot at some point as well. What is your take on where you are with Dragan Bender?
Yeah, it's a patience thing for sure. I think he's going to be very good. I'm looking to see him develop a little bit more of an ability to go to his left this year, if I'm looking for one specific skill set from him. He's gotten really good at taking dudes off the dribble to the right, getting all the way to the rim, or if not getting to the rim, he's developed that nice little kind of baseline floater. But I think just getting more comfortable off the dribble, I think the shooting will continue to come. And I think that's going to kind of be a natural evolution. So if he can really develop his skills as a playmaker, Phoenix hasn't really tried running him in the pick and roll at all as the ball handler yet, which I think is wise. He's not to that point. But maybe in the second half of the season, we start to see a little bit of that from him. I'd consider that a big win with Dragan Bender going forward. I'm very high on him still. He's super young. So it's one of those things where I want to see him add specific skill sets and amplify specific things that he already does well.
Yeah, it seemed like they just kind of threw him in the corner a lot last year and just had him spot up. One thing worth mentioning, the Suns were better both offensively and defensively with him on the floor last year.
So that was, real quick, that was one of the things that really surprised me. With a young guy like that, you don't know what to make of his defensive instincts. He communicated really well, which we all know is huge defensively. And he keeps his head on a swivel and makes good decisions. He doesn't always make the right decision. No 19-year-old is going to do that.
Right.
But he knows when to help, and more importantly, he knows when not to help, and that's huge.
Yep, that's exactly right. He's always been a really good decision maker defensively, and he's kind of had like disruptive-y like hands as well. Really, really interesting player going forward for them as like I think he's probably going to be like more of a really awesome role player, but that's valuable nonetheless.
100%. Yep, absolutely.
The last guy I want to talk about is one of my personal favorites, Tyler Ulis. This is going to be a 3-minute Tyler Ulis appreciation moment.
Yes.
Let's just talk about how great he is. He's awesome shooting off the dribble. Really, really good distributor. Pesky defensively, even though I think a lot of the problems that people were concerned with coming into the NBA definitely showed themselves defensively as well. He's definitely just super small and super skinny, and it's always going to be really difficult for him, I think, to match up against opposing players. Nonetheless, though, again, the Suns were much better defensively with him on the floor last year. Where are you at with Tyler Ulis? Do you think that he can be like a low-end starter? Do you think that he's probably more like a high-end backup long-term? Where are you at?
I think he has the skill to be a low-end starter. He is a higher leverage player as a skilled backup. But to piggyback off your last point about Bender, Tyler Ulis is representative of something I say a lot in the NBA. If you can't be a superstar, like a bona fide superstar, the most important skill you can have is decision making. And Tyler Ulis slays on decision making. He is so good at making the right decision in a split second and then following up that right decision with the right decision after that. Not only does he make the right pass, he then makes the right cut. He sets the right off-ball screen. Like, you never want to draw conclusions at Summer League, but there were two guys that stuck out to me at the 2016 Summer League: Tyler Ulis and Zubats in Los Angeles. And and everything that I saw at Summer League from Ulis, he maintained during the regular season against much stiffer competition. He's in the right spot and he does the right thing. What more can you ask from a basketball player regardless of their stature?
Yeah, no, that I totally agree with. He was really, really good in the mid-range last year. Obviously was awful at the rim.
Right.
Key for him is going to be the jump shot, right? He shot 26% from three last year. If he can get that up to like 35%, he's going to be a really, really good player and such a good decision maker. Maybe because of the fact that he's not necessarily like a difference maker as opposed to just a smart decision maker. Maybe he ends up being something more of a really high-end backup. But nonetheless, Tyler Ulis is awesome, and I love him, and I want all of the success for him.
Agreed.
All right, Andrew, we're going to get out of here now. Is there anything else that you want to note? Tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people where they can find you on social media.
I'm on Twitter at Andrew Lynch. You can find me at Fox Sports. I do both NBA and more professional wrestling, which I know rubs some people the wrong way, but I will say this. The NBA and professional wrestling are the same thing.
Oh, man, that is a conversation for another day. In terms of drama, though, I can definitely see that. Andrew, thank you for coming on, my man. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Earlier today, this podcast is actually going to go up on Sunday. I'm going to release the Monday podcast a little bit early. Earlier today, I wrote up my Markelle Fultz scouting report. I wrote up a big trade grades thing over at Sporting News about the 76ers and Celtics deal. And then I also updated my mock draft over at Seth's Draft House. Keep it locked here over the course of the next few days. We're going to have a few podcasts before the NBA draft. A lot of really exciting stuff happening in the NBA. I'm looking forward to the NBA draft. I hope that all of you guys are too. And just this insane week that continues to get crazier now that Paul George, I would imagine, is on the market from Indiana. So until next time, thank you guys for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. It really helps us move up in the ratings. We're powered by CLNS Media, and we will talk soon.